My name is Victoria Kane and I'm 32 years old. 10 years ago, my identical twin sister Isabel didn't just steal my boyfriend. She stole my billionaire boyfriend, the man I was about to marry, the man who was funding my architectural firm. She destroyed my career, my reputation, and my future in one calculated move. But last month, I walked into her anniversary gala wearing a dress worth more than her house. And the look on her face when she realized who I'd become made every single day of those 10 years worth it. Before I tell you how I went from sleeping on my best friend's couch to owning a multi-million-dollar architecture empire, let me know in the comments section where you're watching from. And if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any of my stories, because what happened next will show you that the best revenge isn't just success. It's showing up when they least expect it. The thing about being an identical twin is that people always assume you're the same person. Same face, same DNA, same everything. But Isabel and I were never the same, not where it mattered. I was the one who stayed up until 3 in the morning perfecting architectural renderings, who chose scholarships over socializing, who believed that hard work and integrity would build the life I wanted. Isabel was the one who learned early that our identical faces could open doors, and she was never afraid to walk through mine. We grew up in a small town outside of Boston, in one of those houses where the paint was always peeling and the heating never quite worked in winter. Our parents, Harold and Marie Kane, were good people. Dad worked double shifts at the manufacturing plant, Mom cleaned houses, but they were tired people. Tired from working, tired from worrying, tired from trying to stretch every dollar. They loved us equally, I know that now, but back then I sometimes wondered if they loved Isabel more. She was easier, you see. She smiled more, complained less, and never made them feel guilty about what they couldn't provide. I was different. I was the one with the scholarship to Boston University's School of Architecture. I was the one who came home during breaks with my nose in textbooks, sketching building designs on every available surface. I was the one who made them worry that I was working too hard, dreaming too big, setting myself up for disappointment. "Victoria, honey," Mom would say, touching my shoulder as I hunched over my drafting table at 2 in the morning, "you need to sleep. You're going to burn yourself out." But I couldn't stop. Architecture wasn't just what I studied, it was who I was. Every line I drew, every structure I designed was a promise to myself that I would build something permanent, something beautiful, something that proved I was more than just the tired daughter of tired parents. Isabel went to community college for a year, took some business classes, then dropped out. She got a job as a receptionist at a high-end real estate firm in downtown Boston, and suddenly she was wearing designer knockoffs and talking about networking and opportunities. She was good at it too. The schmoozing, the small talk, the way she could make people feel like they were the most important person in the room. I graduated top of my class at 24, and within 6 months, I'd landed a junior position at Hartley & Associates, one of Boston's most prestigious architectural firms. It wasn't the corner office, it wasn't even my own office. I shared a cramped workspace with 2 other junior architects, but it was mine and I was building something. That's when I met Alexander Whitmore. I need you to understand something about Alexander. He wasn't just rich. Rich as a guy with a nice car and a vacation house. Alexander was wealthy in the way that changes cities. The Whitmore family had built half of Boston's skyline over 3 generations. Alexander, at 34, was the CEO of Whitmore Development Group, a company worth over $3 billion. He owned properties in 12 countries, and he was in the process of revolutionizing sustainable luxury architecture. And he walked into Hartley & Associates on a Tuesday morning in October, looking for the architect who'd designed the small community center in Dorchester that he'd seen featured in an architecture journal. That architect was me. I was in the conference room when he arrived, wearing my only good suit, a charcoal gray number I'd found at a consignment shop, and I was terrified. My hands were shaking as I spread out my portfolio, showing him the community center design, explaining my philosophy about accessible architecture, about creating beautiful spaces for people who usually got utilitarian boxes. Alexander listened. He didn't check his phone, didn't interrupt, didn't dismiss me the way senior partners at the firm sometimes did. His eyes, this striking pale blue that seemed to see right through pretense, stayed focused on my work, on my words. "This is remarkable," he said, and his voice had this quality that made you believe him. "You understand something most architects miss, that beauty isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. Especially for people who don't have much else." We talked for 2 hours. About architecture, about Boston, about the responsibility of people with resources to build things that mattered. When he left, he shook my hand and said, "I'd like to commission you for a private project. My personal assistant will be in touch." I floated home that day. I called Isabel from the train, practically screaming into my phone. "Belle, you won't believe what happened. Alexander Whitmore wants me to design something for him." "Oh my God, Vicky." She'd squealed, using the nickname only she was allowed to use. "That's incredible. We have to celebrate. Come to my apartment tonight, I'm making dinner." That was Isabel. Always ready to celebrate, always pulling me out of my work-focused tunnel vision to actually live a little. That's what I told myself anyway. The project Alexander commissioned was a private library for his estate in Brookline. Not just any library. A 2-story sanctuary with floor-to-ceiling windows, custom woodwork, a reading loft, space for over 10,000 books. It was the kind of project that could make a young architect's career. We met weekly to discuss the design. He was involved in every detail, but not in a controlling way, in a collaborative way. He trusted my vision while adding his own insights. And somewhere between arguing about the angle of the skylights and debating the merits of oak versus walnut shelving, we became friends. Then we became more than just friends. It happened gradually, then all at once. The meetings stretched longer than necessary. The conversations that drifted from architecture to everything else. Books, music, childhood dreams, fears we'd never told anyone. The way his hand would brush mine when we were looking at plans, and how that brief contact would send electricity through my entire body. 6 months into the project, he kissed me. We were in his half-finished library, golden hour light streaming through the windows I'd designed, and he'd just said something about how the space felt exactly right, how I'd understood what he couldn't articulate. And then he was kissing me and I was kissing him back, and the world narrowed to just that moment. "I've been wanting to do that for months," he said, his forehead resting against mine. "I've been wanting you to," I whispered back. Dating Alexander was like stepping into a different dimension. Suddenly I was attending gallery openings and charity galas, flying to New York for weekend getaways, eating at restaurants where the waiters knew his name. He insisted on paying for everything, and at first I fought it. My pride wouldn't let me be a woman who depended on a man's money. "Victoria," he said one night over dinner at some absurdly expensive restaurant, "let me be clear about something. I'm not paying for things because I think you can't. I'm paying because I want to, because it brings me joy to give you experiences you deserve. And because frankly, I make more in an hour than you make in a month, and that's not your fault. It's an economic system that undervalues brilliant young architects. Let me balance it a little." How do you argue with that? I didn't tell Isabel about us right away. Not because I was hiding it, but because it felt so fragile, so impossibly good, that I was afraid saying it out loud would break the spell. Also, there was a small, guilty part of me that knew Isabel would be jealous. Not maliciously jealous, just, Isabel had always dated guys who were nice enough but going nowhere. And here I was, the serious one, the workaholic one, falling in love with a literal billionaire. When I finally told her 3 months into the relationship, her reaction seemed perfect. "Vicky. Oh my God." He hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. We were at her apartment, drinking cheap wine on her thrift store couch. "I'm so happy for you. When do I get to meet him?" "Soon," I promised. "He's actually talking about..." "Well, he said he wants me to leave Hartley and Associates. He wants to fund my own architectural firm. He said I'm too talented to be a junior architect taking orders. He wants to be my first major client." Isabel's eyes went wide. "Vicky, that's insane. That's life-changing." "I know." I was crying now, happy tears streaming down my face. "I can't believe this is my life. Sometimes I wake up and think I'm going to find out it's all a dream." She hugged me again, and I felt her hand stroking my hair the way she used to when we were kids and one of us had a nightmare. "You deserve this, Vicky. You've worked so hard for so long. You deserve everything good." I should have heard the edge in her voice. The slight tightness. But I was too happy, too relieved that my twin sister was happy for me. 2 weeks later, I brought Alexander to Sunday dinner at our parents' house. Mom had cleaned the house within an inch of its life, and Dad had actually put on a button-up shirt. Isabel was already there when we arrived, wearing a dress I'd never seen before, something form-fitting and elegant that probably cost 3 months of her salary. "You must be Alexander," she said, extending her hand with a smile that was my smile but somehow different. brighter and more calculated. I'm Isabel, Vicky's much more fun twin. Alexander laughed, shaking her hand. Isabel. Victoria talks about you constantly. It's uncanny, you two really are identical. On the outside, Isabel said, still holding his hand a beat too long. But Vicky got all the brains and talent. I just got the personality. It should have been a throwaway comment, self-deprecating humor. But I saw something flicker in Alexander's eyes. Curiosity maybe. Interest. Dinner was good. Alexander charmed my parents, asking Dad about his work, complimenting Mom's cooking, treating them with genuine respect rather than the condescension I'd feared. Isabel was vivacious, telling stories, making everyone laugh, being the entertaining twin while I was the serious one. At one point I went to the kitchen to help Mom with dessert, and when I came back Isabel and Alexander were deep in conversation. Her hand was on his arm, her head tilted in that way that made every man feel like he was the most fascinating person alive. Everything okay? I asked, setting down the pie. Perfect, Isabel said, pulling her hand back. Alexander was just telling me about the library project. Sounds amazing, Vicky. You're so talented. The evening ended well. Alexander kissed me goodnight in his car, told me my family was wonderful, said he could see where I got my kindness. I felt guilty for the small knot of anxiety that had formed in my stomach watching him and Isabel talk. Over the next month, Isabel started showing up more. She dropped by my apartment unexpectedly, always when she knew Alexander might be there. She'd text him directly, she'd gotten his number, just in case there was ever an emergency with Vicky, she said, asking for advice about her career, about real estate, about networking in Boston's professional world. Your sister is ambitious, Alexander commented one night. She reminds me of you in some ways. Same drive, just different focus. We're not that similar, I said, and hated how defensive I sounded. Of course not, he said, kissing my forehead. You're the genius architect who's going to change how people think about accessible design. She's just charming. Just charming. Those words should have comforted me. Instead they lodged in my chest like a splinter. The library project was nearly complete and Alexander and I were planning the launch of my new firm, Kane Architecture. He'd secured financing, found office space, even recruited 2 other young architects to work under me. I was 25 years old and about to be a business owner, with a billionaire boyfriend who believed in me and a future so bright it hurt to look at it directly. I should have been the happiest person alive. Instead I was noticing things. The way Isabel always seemed to be around. The way Alexander texts to me sometimes comes late at night now with apologies about unexpected meetings. The way Isabel started dressing differently, more sophisticated, more expensive. Where was she getting the money? I got a promotion, she said when I asked about the designer purse I'd seen on her Instagram. They made me an assistant property manager. Better pay. It made sense. Everything made sense. Except it didn't. The night it all fell apart was a Friday in April. Alexander and I had plans to celebrate. Kane Architecture was officially opening Monday morning. But he texted at 6 p.m., saying something had come up, a crisis with a property in New York. He had to fly out immediately. He was so sorry, he'd make it up to me. I was disappointed but understanding. This was his life. Unexpected emergencies, last-minute flights, the cost of running a billion-dollar company. I decided to surprise Isabel instead. Take her out for dinner with the money I'd been saving for my celebration with Alexander. She deserved thanks too. She'd been so supportive through everything, even helped me pick out furniture for my new office. I showed up at her apartment at 7:30, holding a bottle of wine and smiling. I was about to knock when I heard voices inside. Male voice. Her door was slightly ajar, she always forgot to close it completely. I pushed it open, calling out, "Belle, it's me. I brought wine and I'm demanding you drop everything and seal." I stopped. Alexander was standing in her living room. He was wearing the same clothes I'd seen him in that morning. He was not in New York. He was here in my sister's apartment, holding her hand. They both turned to look at me and for a frozen moment none of us moved. "Victoria," Alexander said, and his face did something complicated. Surprise, guilt, something else I couldn't read. "Vicky," Isabel said, and she didn't let go of his hand. We were going to tell you." The wine bottle slipped from my fingers. It hit her cheap carpet with a dull thud but didn't break. I remember thinking stupidly that it should have broken, that something should have shattered. "Tell me what?" My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded hollow, distant, like it was coming from underwater. Alexander let go of Isabel's hand finally, taking a step toward me. Victoria, please. This happened gradually. We didn't plan. How long? I interrupted. How long has this been happening? Silence. Awful, crushing silence. 2 months, Isabel finally said. Her voice was small, but her chin was up, defiant. It's been 2 months. 2 months. 2 months while I was planning my future. 2 months while Alexander was funding my dream. 2 months while my identical twin sister was pretending to be my supporter, my cheerleader, my best friend. I'm so sorry, Alexander said, and he actually looked sorry, which somehow made it worse. Victoria, you're an incredibly talented, brilliant woman. But Isabel and we connected in a way I didn't expect. I tried to fight it. I really did. You tried to fight it, I repeated numbly. For how long? A week or a day? Vicky, please, Isabel said, and now she was crying, actual tears streaming down her face. My face. I never meant to hurt you. But I fell in love with him. I know it's awful, I know it's the worst thing I could do, but I can't help how I feel. You can't help it, I said. The shock was wearing off, replaced by something hot and terrible rising in my chest. You can't help systematically pursuing your sister's boyfriend. You can't help showing up everywhere, getting his number, texting him, dressing up, flirting. That was all just something that happened to you. It wasn't like that. How much? I asked Alexander, cutting Isabel off. How much of my business funding is your guilt money? How much of Kane Architecture is just you paying me off? That's not fair, he said, his jaw tight. Your talent is real. The business is real. My investment in you professionally has nothing to do with. Are you sleeping with my sister? I finished. Because let's be clear about what's happening here. You're leaving me for my identical twin. The woman who looks exactly like me but is apparently more fun, more charming, more whatever the hell I'm not enough of. Victoria, that's not. Get out, I said to Alexander. Get out of this apartment. Get out of my business. Get out of my life. Victoria. Get out. I was screaming now, and somewhere in the building someone was probably calling the police, but I didn't care. Get out, or I swear to God I will burn down everything you've built. Starting with your reputation. He left. He actually left, walking past me without another word, and I heard his footsteps disappearing down the hallway, the elevator dinging, and then he was gone. I turned back to Isabel. She was still crying, mascara running down her face. My face. Vicky, she whispered. I'm so sorry. But I love him. I really truly love him. And he loves me. That's not my fault. You can't control who you fall in love with. I laughed. It was an ugly sound, brittle and sharp. You're right. You can't control who you fall in love with. But you can control whether you pursue your sister's boyfriend. You can control whether you lie and sneak around and systematically destroy the person who's supposed to be your other half. That part you chose. I know, she sobbed. I know it's awful. But Vicky, you have to understand, being your twin has been hard. Everyone always compares us. You were the smart one, the talented one, the one with the future. I was just the other one. And then you met Alexander and you were going to have everything. The career, the money, the perfect life. And I was going to be left behind again, watching you succeed while I answered phones and pretended to be happy for you. So you took him, I said flatly. You saw me being happy and you couldn't stand it, so you took the one thing that would hurt me most. I fell in love with him, she insisted. That's not taking. That's just what happened. I looked at my sister, my identical twin, the person I'd shared a room with for 18 years, shared everything with, and I didn't recognize her. I'm done, I said quietly. With you, with him, with all of this. Keep him. Marry him. Have a beautiful life. But stay the hell away from me. I walked out of that apartment and I didn't look back. The next 72 hours were a blur of phone calls, legal consultations, and crying jags that left me dehydrated and hollow. Alexander called 47 times. I counted them. I didn't answer a single one. Isabel called 2, sent texts, and showed up at my apartment building. I threatened to call the police and she finally stopped. The professional fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Monday morning, the day Kane Architecture was supposed to open, I received an email from Alexander's lawyer. The subject line read, Termination of Business Agreement. Inside was a formal letter explaining that Whitmore Development Group would be withdrawing all financing from Kane Architecture, effective immediately. The office lease, paid for 6 months in advance, would be cancelled with a financial penalty paid by Whitmore Development. The 2 architects hired to work under me were offered positions at other firms, with Alexander personally covering the cost of breaking their contracts with me. In other words, he was erasing me. Cleanly, efficiently, and legally. I would receive no money, no office, no team, and no future. But it got worse. Because Hartley and Associates had let me go 2 months earlier, anticipating my departure to my own firm. My position had been filled. And when I reached out to other firms looking for any architectural position, I found doors closed. Not slammed, that would have been too obvious. Just quietly closed. I realized with growing horror that Alexander had relationships with every major architectural firm and development company in Boston. He didn't have to badmouth me. He just had to let it be known that hiring me would make working with Whitmore Development more difficult. In an industry where one billionaire developer could make or break your year, no one wanted to take that risk. At 25, I was effectively blacklisted. My savings lasted 2 months. I sold the few expensive things Alexander had given me. A watch, some jewelry, a designer handbag I'd never felt comfortable carrying. I moved out of my apartment into a room I rented from my best friend, Naomi Chin, a graphic designer who was one of the few people who didn't judge me for the situation. Actually, that's not true. Naomi judged the situation plenty. She just judged Isabel and Alexander, not me. "This is insane," she said one night, watching me eat ramen for the 4th time that week. "You're one of the most talented architects in this city and you're unemployable because some billionaire's ego is bruised? That can't be legal." "It's not illegal," I said dully. "He's not telling anyone not to hire me. He's just making it clear that doing business with him would be easier if they didn't. That's just business." "It's revenge," Naomi snapped. "It's punishment for you daring to reject him." Maybe she was right. Or maybe Alexander genuinely believed he was being clean about the breakup by handling all the financial separation quickly. Maybe he thought erasing me from his professional life was kinder than leaving me in his orbit. I didn't know. I didn't care. I cared that I couldn't get a job. I cared that my parents called, worried, having heard rumors from Isabel about what happened. I cared that I was 25 years old, sleeping on a mattress in someone's spare room, my entire career destroyed before it really began. The worst part was seeing them together. Because Boston is a small city for wealthy people, and Isabel and Alexander were very publicly together now. I saw them in the society pages, attending charity galas and gallery openings. I saw them on Instagram. Isabel had gotten very active on social media suddenly, posting photos of their trips to Martha's Vineyard, their dinners at exclusive restaurants, and her new designer wardrobe. She posted a photo of them at what looked like a Whitmore Development event, her in a stunning red dress, Alexander's arm around her waist, both of them smiling. The caption read, "When you find your person #grateful #blessed." I stared at that photo for 20 minutes, my phone screen blurring through tears. She looked happy. They looked happy. And I was drowning. My mom called one Sunday. "Victoria, honey," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Isabel says you won't return her calls." "I won't," I confirmed. "She's your sister. Your twin. What happened was, it was unfortunate, but people fall in love. You can't hold this grudge forever." "Mom," I said, my voice very flat, very controlled. "She systematically pursued my boyfriend while pretending to support me. And when she got him, he destroyed my career. So yes, actually, I can hold this grudge forever. And I'd appreciate it if you stopped pressuring me to forgive her." "Victoria Ann Kane," Mom said, using my full name the way she did when I was in trouble as a child. "Family is family. No man is worth losing your sister over." I hung up on my own mother. I'd never done that before. But I couldn't listen to her defend Isabel, couldn't hear about how I was being dramatic, how I needed to be the bigger person. The holidays were unbearable. I worked retail at a mall bookstore, selling romance novels and business books to people who didn't know I'd once designed spaces that were featured in architectural journals. I told no one about my past. When coworkers asked where I'd gone to school, I said Boston University, and changed the subject. On Thanksgiving, my parents invited both of us. I didn't go. Christmas the same. I spent both holidays with Naomi's family, who were kind enough not to ask too many questions about why I wasn't with my own. In January I saw the engagement announcement. Isabel Kane and Alexander Whitmore, set to be married in June at his estate in Brookline. The engagement photo showed her wearing a ring that probably cost more than a house, standing in front of the library I had designed, the one that was supposed to be my masterpiece. That was the night I broke. Not in a dramatic smashing things way. In a quiet, terrifying way where I stood in Naomi's bathroom and realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt anything other than numb despair. When I looked in the mirror at my face, Isabel's face, and wanted to claw it off, Naomi found me sitting on the bathroom floor at 2 a.m. not crying, just staring at nothing. "That's it," she said, sitting down next to me. "We're leaving Boston." "What?" "We're leaving," she repeated. "Vicky, this city is killing you. You can't rebuild here, not with them everywhere, not with everyone knowing your story. We're leaving." "Where?" "I don't know. Somewhere big enough that you can disappear and start over. New York? Seattle? Or LA? "I can't afford to move," I said numbly. "I can," Naomi said. "I just landed a huge freelance contract with a tech company in Seattle. They want me on site for 6 months with an option to go permanent. Come with me. We'll get an apartment. You can work whatever job you need to while you figure out your next move. But you have to get out of Boston. Please." I looked at her, this friend who had carried me through the worst months of my life without complaint, without judgment. And I made a decision. "Hey," I said. "Okay, let's go." We left Boston in February. I didn't tell my parents until we were already on the road. I definitely didn't tell Isabel. As far as I was concerned, they could all believe I'd disappeared, failed completely, maybe even died. It would hurt less than knowing I was still out there, still carrying this wound they'd given me. Seattle was rainy and coffee and blessed anonymity. No one knew me. No one cared about Boston society or Whitmore development or the twin sisters scandal. I was just Victoria Kane, graphic design assistant, roommate, nobody special. I thought that would feel like failure. Instead, it felt like relief. For the first 6 months, I didn't touch architecture. Didn't sketch, didn't design, didn't even look at buildings the way I used to. I worked at Naomi's design firm doing administrative work, learning the tech industry's approach to design, keeping my head down. Then one Saturday, wandering through Pike Place Market, I saw a small storefront for rent. It was in terrible shape. Water damage, outdated wiring, a layout that made no sense. But it had good bones. Great bones, actually. Original brick, high ceilings, huge windows facing the water. I stood outside that storefront for an hour, my mind automatically redesigning it. Where the walls should go, how to maximize the light, what it could become. That night, I opened my laptop and designed that space properly. Not for a client, not for money. Just for me. Just to see if I still could. I cried while I worked, but they weren't despairing tears anymore. They were different. Hopeful maybe. Or just feeling something again. The design was good. Really good. Better than anything I'd done for Hartley and Associates. Maybe even better than the library. Because this design came from a different place. Not from the ambitious 25-year-old trying to prove herself, but from the 26-year-old who'd lost everything and was slowly, painfully, learning she was more than what had been taken from her. I showed it to Naomi. "Holy shit, Vicky," she breathed, scrolling through my digital rendering. "This is incredible. Why aren't you doing this for real?" "Because no one will hire me," I reminded her. "So don't get hired," she said. "Hire yourself." "With what money?" She looked at me seriously. "I have savings. And I believe in you. Let me invest in you. Not like Alexander. Not with strings, not with control. As a friend, as a business partner if you want, or just as a loan you pay back when you can. But Vicky, you're too talented to let one asshole destroy your career forever." I wanted to say no. My pride, what was left of it, wanted to refuse help, to prove I could do it alone. But I was learning slowly that pride and isolation had nearly destroyed me. That accepting help from people who genuinely cared about me wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. "Hey," I said. "But we do it legally, properly. You're an investor, not just a friend doing charity. When Kane Architecture Seattle succeeds, you get returns." He grinned. "When not, if." I like that energy. Kane Architecture Seattle started in a shared co-working space with a desk, a laptop, and a website Naomi built for free. My first client was a nonprofit that wanted to renovate a community center in a low-income neighborhood. They had almost no money, but they had vision and they had need. I designed them something beautiful. Not luxury beautiful, functional beauty. Accessible and beautiful. The kind of space that makes people feel valued, that says, you matter, your community matters. It got noticed. A local architecture blog featured it. Then a Seattle newspaper. Then a non-profit organization focused on accessible design reached out, asking if I'd speak on a panel about community-focused architecture. I said yes. That panel led to another client. Then another. Small projects, nothing glamorous, but each one I poured everything into. Each design was a statement. I'm still here. I'm still good. You didn't break me. The tech boom was exploding in Seattle, and suddenly there was money, lots of money, looking for architects who could design innovative office spaces, live-work communities, and sustainable housing developments. I pitched a tech startup on a radical office redesign focused on employee wellness and environmental sustainability. They hired me. That project won an award from a sustainable design organization. More tech companies called. I hired my first employee, a brilliant young architect named Tyler Kim who'd been working at a firm that undervalued him. Then a second, a third. By the time I was 28, Kane Architecture Seattle had 15 employees and a reputation for innovative, sustainable, people-centered design. We weren't the biggest firm in the city, but we were known. We were respected. And I was making money. Real money. The kind of money that meant I could pay Naomi back with interest, could afford a beautiful apartment with a view of Puget Sound, could shop without checking price tags, could breathe without the constant anxiety of impending financial disaster. I didn't date. Colleagues asked me out, clients made interesting noises, friends tried to set me up. I smiled and declined. The wound from Alexander and Isabel wasn't healed enough for that. Maybe it never would be. But I was okay. More than okay, I was successful, fulfilled, building the career I'd always dreamed of. It looked different than I'd imagined at 25, but it was mine. Wholly, completely mine. I thought about Boston sometimes. About my parents, who I called once a month now. Brief, cordial calls where we discussed weather and work and nothing real. About Isabel, who I never asked about and they'd learned not to mention. I didn't think about Alexander. I tried not to. When I was 30, Kane Architecture Seattle was approached by a major development company that wanted to bid on a huge project. A mixed-use sustainable development in downtown Seattle that would include affordable housing, commercial space, and green public areas. If we got it, it would be the biggest project my firm had ever handled. The catch. The development company wanted a partnership with an established firm to share risk. They suggested Whitmore Development Group. I sat in that meeting listening to their pitch, my face carefully neutral while my heart hammered. They didn't know. They had no idea about my history with Whitmore. Why would they? It was 5 years ago in a different city and I'd never publicized what happened. We'll have to decline, I said calmly. Kane Architecture has a policy against partnerships with firms that have demonstrated unethical business practices. Whitmore Development has a history that doesn't align with our values. The development company representatives looked confused but didn't push. They found another firm to partner with. We didn't get the project. Tyler approached me after that meeting. Boss, I have to ask, what is the history with Whitmore? I've worked with them on previous projects at my old firm. They're tough but generally ethical. I looked at this young architect who reminded me of who I'd been 5 years ago. Talented, ambitious, believing the best of people. Personal history, I said. Sometimes ethics are situational. Let's just say I know how they operate when they want something and it's not how I run my business. He nodded, respected my boundaries and moved on. But that meeting reminded me that Boston still existed. That Alexander and Isabel were still there, living the life that was supposed to be partly mine. That I'd spent 5 years running from a past I'd never actually confronted. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I Googled them. The search results were extensive. Isabel Whitmore, she'd taken his name of course, was a fixture in Boston society. She sat on charity boards, hosted fundraisers, appeared in fashion magazines talking about sustainable luxury and giving back. Alexander was more reclusive but still prominent. His company had expanded globally, he'd been featured in Forbes, he was being called one of the most influential developers of his generation. They looked happy in the photos. Isabel had cut her hair, our hair, into a sleek bob I'd never worn. She dressed expensively but tastefully, the kind of effortless elegance that took a lot of money and even more effort. Alexander looked older, tired around the eyes but successful. Powerful. They'd been married for 4.5 years. No children that I could see, though several articles mentioned their hoped-for future family. They lived in the Brookline estate, the one with the library I'd designed. My library. In my boyfriend's house. Occupied by my sister. The rage I felt was old and familiar but sharper now. Because 5 years ago I'd been drowning, barely surviving, convinced I'd lost everything that mattered. And they'd won. They'd gotten everything. Love, money, success, happiness, while I got exile and ashes. Except I hadn't stayed in the ashes. I'd built something new, something mine, something they had no part of. And suddenly, violently, I wanted them to know that. I wanted them to see what I'd become. I wanted them to understand that taking Alexander and destroying my Boston future hadn't destroyed me. It had just relocated me. The opportunity came 3 months later at an architectural conference in Boston. The International Sustainable Architecture Summit was the biggest conference in our field, held every 2 years. I'd been invited to speak on a panel about community-centered design in rapidly developing cities. It was a significant honor, the kind of recognition that meant Kane Architecture Seattle wasn't just regional anymore. We were being taken seriously on a national stage. The conference was in October. In Boston. At a hotel 3 miles from where Alexander and Isabel lived. Naomi saw my face when I got the invitation. "You're going, right? This is huge." "It's in Boston," I said unnecessarily. "I know. And you're still going because you've earned this and you're not going to let ghosts keep you from your career." He was right. I knew she was right. But the thought of going back to that city, of potentially running into them, made my stomach twist. "What if I see them?" I asked quietly. "Then you see them," Naomi said firmly. "Vicky, you're not the same person who left. You're not the broken 25-year-old who couldn't get hired. You're the 30-year-old CEO of a successful firm. You're the architect who's being invited to speak at international conferences. If you see them, you hold your head up and you let them see exactly what they didn't destroy." I accepted the invitation. The next 3 months were a blur of preparation. The panel, my speech, coordinating travel for my senior architects who were also attending. And I'll admit, shopping. Because if I was going back to Boston, if there was any chance I'd run into them, I was going to look exactly like what I'd become. Success. I bought a dress for the conference gala. The final night event where major firms networked and deals were made. It was a midnight blue silk that cost more than my entire wardrobe had cost 5 years ago. It was elegant, sophisticated, the kind of dress that screamed quiet money and absolute confidence. I booked a suite at the conference hotel. First-class flights for my team. Everything perfect, everything professional, everything designed to show that Kane Architecture Seattle was a firm that had arrived. But underneath all that preparation was a question I couldn't quite answer. Did I want to see them or did I desperately hope to avoid them? I landed in Boston on a Wednesday afternoon in October. The leaves were changing, the air had that crisp autumn quality I'd forgotten during my Seattle years. My team checked into the hotel and I stood at my suite window looking out at the city I'd fled. It looked smaller somehow. Or maybe I was just bigger. The conference started the next morning. My panel was Friday afternoon. I spent Thursday attending workshops, networking, introducing myself to architects and developers I'd only known by reputation. And I watched people's faces when they heard my name and my firm. Kane Architecture Seattle? You did that sustainable housing project that won the Thompson Award. Victoria Kane? I read your article in Architecture Today about accessible luxury design. Wait, you're Kane? I didn't realize you were so young. Recognition. Respect. The thing I'd been chasing at 25 and had finally, slowly, earned by 30. Thursday night there was a smaller networking reception. I was talking to a developer from Portland about a potential project when I felt it. That prickling awareness that someone was watching me. I turned, scanning the room, and saw him. Alexander. He was across the reception hall talking to a group of men in expensive suits, but his eyes were on me. For a moment we just stared at each other across the crowd. He looked shocked, like he'd seen a ghost. Which I suppose he had. 5 years. 5 years since I'd seen him in person. He looked older, more gray at his temples, deeper lines around his eyes. But still handsome in that patrician way wealthy men age. Still powerful, still commanding attention. I looked back at him, my face carefully blank, and then I deliberately turned away. Resumed my conversation with the Portland developer as if nothing had happened. As if the man who'd destroyed my first career wasn't standing 50 feet away, staring. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him excuse himself from his group. I saw him start walking toward me. My heart was racing, but I kept my voice steady, my smile professional, my attention on the developer. Victoria. His voice. I'd forgotten how his voice sounded, not forgotten exactly, but pushed it down so deep I'd stopped hearing it in my memories. I turned slowly as if I hadn't noticed his approach, my eyebrows raised in polite inquiry. The look you give a stranger who's interrupted a business conversation. I'm sorry, I said coolly, do we know each other? His face did something complicated. Victoria, it's me. Alexander. Alexander Whitmore. Oh, I said as if I'd just placed him. Mr. Whitmore. Of course. I believe we met very briefly years ago. Before I moved to Seattle. I turned to the Portland developer. This is Alexander Whitmore of Whitmore Development Group. Mr. Whitmore, this is James Chin from Cascade Development. Alexander's jaw was tight. Victoria, could I speak with you privately for a moment? I'm actually in the middle of a business discussion, I said, gesturing to James. Perhaps another time? Please, Alexander said, and there was something raw in his voice that made James glance between us uncomfortably. Just 5 minutes. I looked at James apologetically. Would you excuse me? We can continue this conversation tomorrow. Of course, James said, reading the tension correctly and making his escape. I turned back to Alexander, my face still carefully neutral. You have 5 minutes. He led me to a quieter corner of the reception hall, away from the crowd. Up close I could see more changes. The gray wasn't just at his temples, it was threaded through his dark hair. The lines around his eyes weren't laugh lines. He looked tired. Successful still, but tired. You're in Seattle, he said, as if that explained everything or nothing. I am. I had no idea. Your firm, Kane Architecture Seattle. I saw the name on the conference registry, but I assumed it was a coincidence. That it couldn't be you. Why couldn't it be me? I asked, my voice flat. Because. He stopped, searching for words. Because the last time I saw you, you were, and I thought. You thought what, Mr. Whitmore? That destroying my Boston career had destroyed me completely? That I disappeared into nothing because you removed your support? That's not fair, he said, his voice low. I didn't destroy your career. What happened between us was personal. I kept it professional. I removed my financing because we were no longer together. And you let it be known that hiring me would make doing business with Whitmore Development difficult. I interrupted. Don't pretend you don't know how this industry works. You didn't have to badmouth me. You just had to make it clear I was persona non grata. His face flushed. I may have been less careful than I should have been about separating personal from professional. I was hurt, angry that you cut me off completely. You were hurt. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You were sleeping with my identical twin sister while funding my business, and you were hurt that I didn't want to maintain a friendly professional relationship? Victoria, please. What happened with Isabel? It wasn't planned. Just happened. We fell in love. She systematically pursued you, I said, my voice cold and precise. She got your number, showed up wherever you were, dressed to catch your attention. That's not love just happening. That's a calculated campaign. And you let it happen. You participated. And then when I objected to my sister stealing my boyfriend, you punished me professionally. I never meant. Your intentions don't matter, I cut him off. Your impact does. And your impact was that I spent 2 years unable to get hired in my field, living in a spare room, working retail, watching you and my sister live the life I should have had. Is that why you left Boston? Because you couldn't find work. I left Boston because staying in a city where everyone knew me as the twin whose sister stole her billionaire boyfriend was slowly killing me. I left because I needed to rebuild somewhere. I could be Victoria Kane the architect, not Victoria Kane the betrayed sister. He was quiet for a long moment. I'm sorry, he said finally. Truly sorry. For all of it. The way it ended, the professional fallout, the pain we caused you. If I could go back. You can't, I said simply. And honestly, I'm not sure I'd want you to. Because the life I've built in Seattle, it's mine. Completely mine. No one funded it, no one gave it to me, no one can take it away. It's built on my work, my vision, my refusal to stay destroyed. And that's worth more than anything I had in Boston. You've done incredibly well, he said, and he sounded genuine. Your firm's reputation is excellent. The projects I've seen are remarkable. You should be proud. I am, I said. And now, if we're done with this trip down memory lane, I have actual business to attend to. I started to walk away, but he caught my arm. Not aggressively, just a light touch, but I froze. Is Isabel here? I asked without turning around. Is my sister at this conference? No, he said quietly. She's at home. Things between us are complicated right now. I turned back, studying his face. Trouble in paradise? He didn't answer directly. I should let you go. But Victoria, I'm glad you're doing well. I'm glad you rebuilt. You deserved better than what we did to you. Yes, I agreed. I did. I walked away and didn't look back. My hands were shaking when I got back to my suite. I poured myself a scotch from the minibar, expensive scotch that I could now afford without wincing, and stood at the window looking out at Boston's lights. I'd done it. I'd seen him, spoken to him, held my own without falling apart. He'd seen what I'd become. And it should have felt triumphant. That it felt incomplete. Because Alexander wasn't the only one who'd destroyed me. He wasn't even the main one. Isabel was. My identical twin, my other half, the person who should have been incapable of hurting me that deeply. And she wasn't here to see what I'd become. The next morning I woke up with a plan. A terrible, impulsive, possibly vindictive plan that I should absolutely not act on. I texted Naomi, I ran into Alexander last night. I want to see Isabel. Am I crazy? Her response came 3 minutes later. Probably. Do it anyway. You've earned the closure. Closure. That's what I told myself I wanted. I Googled Isabel again, looking for her schedule. Found that she was hosting a charity luncheon today, Friday, at a gallery in Back Bay. A fundraiser for arts education in low-income schools. The kind of tasteful, socially conscious event that Boston's elite loved. The kind of event that was open to anyone who made a donation. I made a donation. A large donation. The kind that got you a personal phone call from the event coordinator, thanking you profusely and ensuring you knew you'd be seated at a prime table. My panel was at 2 p.m. The luncheon started at 11. I had time. I dressed carefully. Not the conference-appropriate suit I'd planned to wear. Something else. Something calculated. I wore a cream-colored designer suit that probably cost more than my parents' monthly mortgage. I wore heels that added 3 inches to my height. I wore the watch I'd bought myself when Kane Architecture Seattle landed its first major contract. A vintage Cartier that had been an investment and a statement. I wore my hair the way I used to wear it in Boston, pulled back in a sleek bun that showed my face clearly. Isabel's face. I wanted her to see me coming. The gallery was in a restored brownstone, all exposed brick and industrial lighting. Beautiful space, probably designed by someone good. I walked in at 11:15, fashionably late, and checked in with the coordinator. Miss Kane, thank you so much for your generous donation. Mrs. Whitmore will be so pleased to meet you. You're at table 4 just there. Table 4 had a good view of the room and, more importantly, a direct sight line to the head table where Isabel sat with other event organizers and major donors. I sat down, nodded politely to the other guests at my table. A professor, a gallery owner, a couple who ran a foundation, and waited. It took her 12 minutes to notice me. I saw the exact moment it happened. She was standing, working the room, laughing with a donor, her hand on the woman's arm in that practiced way she had. And then her eyes swept across the room, past my table, then snapped back. She froze. Her face went absolutely white, so pale I thought she might faint. The smile disappeared. Her hand, which had been gesturing while she spoke, dropped to her side. We stared at each other across the crowded gallery. 2 identical faces, 5 years older, worlds apart. She excused herself from her conversation and walked toward my table. I watched her come, noting everything. The designer dress. Understated but expensive. The jewelry, real, significant pieces. The confidence in her walk that came from years of being Mrs. Alexander Whitmore. But also the tightness around her eyes. The slight strain in her smile. The way her hands trembled just slightly as she approached. She stopped at my table. The conversation around me had died. People sensing drama, leaning in without being obvious. Victoria, she said. Her voice was exactly the same as mine. It always has been. I didn't know you were in Boston. I'm here for the architectural conference, I said pleasantly, as if we were casual acquaintances catching up. I'm speaking on a panel this afternoon about sustainable community design. It's quite an honor. I heard you moved to Seattle. I did. 5 years ago. I run an architecture firm there now. Kane Architecture Seattle. We've done quite well. Her eyes were scanning my face, my clothes, looking for, what? Signs of the broken woman who'd left Boston? Evidence that I was still destroyed? That's wonderful, Vicky. I'm so glad you're doing well. Are you? I asked, my voice still pleasant but with an edge now. Are you glad I'm doing well, Belle? Or are you just relieved I didn't die when you and Alexander destroyed my career? The people at my table weren't even pretending not to listen now. Isabel's face flushed. Can we talk privately? She asked quietly. Why? We haven't had anything to say to each other for 5 years. What's changed? Please, she said, and there was something desperate in her voice. Please, Vicky. Just 5 minutes. I stood gracefully and followed her through a side door into what looked like a gallery office. She closed the door and turned to face me. You look good, she said, and she sounded like she was going to cry. You look really good. Successful and happy, and... Did you think I wouldn't be? I interrupted. Did you think I'd spend the rest of my life broken because you took Alexander? I didn't know what happened to you, she said, and now tears were actually falling. You disappeared. Mom and Dad said you moved to Seattle, but you wouldn't talk to them, wouldn't talk to me. I thought maybe you'd. I worried you'd. Killed myself. I finished bluntly. Sorry to disappoint you, Belle. I just rebuilt my life instead. I never wanted you to be hurt like that, she sobbed. I know you don't believe me, but it's true. I fell in love with him and I couldn't stop it, and I convinced myself you'd be okay because you were always the strong one, the talented one. Stop, I said, my voice sharp. Stop making this about your feelings. You didn't accidentally fall in love with Alexander. You pursued him deliberately. You saw me happy and you couldn't stand it, so you took the one thing you knew would destroy me. That's not. It is exactly that, I cut her off. And you know what the worst part is? It wasn't even about him. If you'd genuinely fallen in love with some man I'd never met, if you'd found your own happiness, I would have been thrilled for you. But you couldn't do that. You had to take mine. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I've wanted to tell you that for 5 years. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I am sorry. I looked at my twin sister, my identical face staring back at me with tears and regret, and I felt nothing. No rage, no pain, not even satisfaction. Just a vast, empty distance. I don't forgive you, I said quietly. I don't think I ever will. What you did fundamentally changed who I am and who we are to each other. You're not my sister anymore, Belle. You're just a woman who looks like me and made choices that taught me I can't trust people who share my DNA. Vicky. But I do want to thank you, I continued. Because leaving Boston, rebuilding in Seattle, doing it all completely on my own, it made me stronger than I ever would have been if I'd stayed here, relying on Alexander's money and connections. You and he took everything from me, and that forced me to build something better than what I had. So thank you. For that. I walked to the door, then turned back. Oh, and Belle, Alexander and I talked last night. He mentioned things are complicated between you two. I hope you didn't build your entire life around a man who might leave you. That would be unfortunate. Her face went white again. What did he say? Nothing specific. But you and I both know that Alexander has a pattern, don't we? He was with me when he started pursuing you. What makes you think you're different? What makes you think there isn't another woman, younger, more exciting, waiting in the wings? It was cruel. I knew it was cruel. But I watched my words land, watched doubt bloom in her eyes, and I felt a cold satisfaction. Enjoy your luncheon, I said, and walked out. My panel at 2 p.m. was excellent. I spoke about community-centered design, about creating spaces that served people rather than egos, about sustainable architecture that considers not just environmental impact but human impact, about building things that lasted. The audience responded enthusiastically. Other architects approached me afterward, wanting to talk about collaborations, about my philosophy, about my work. I collected business cards, made connections, represented Kane Architecture Seattle with professionalism and confidence. And in the back of my mind, I kept replaying Isabel's face when I'd planted that seed of doubt. The fear in her eyes at the suggestion that Alexander might be cheating. Was it true? I didn't know. Alexander had said things were complicated, but that could mean anything. Financial stress, disagreements about children, normal marital issues. But I'd weaponized that ambiguity. I'd used my knowledge of their origin story, how they'd come together through betrayal, to make her doubt his faithfulness. Because if he could do it with her, he could do it to her. That evening, back in my suite, my phone rang. Unknown Boston number. I answered. Victoria Kane. Ms. Kane, this is Detective James Holder from Boston PD. I'm calling because a woman named Isabel Whitmore has filed a harassment complaint against you. My stomach dropped. I'm sorry, what? She's claiming you showed up at a charity event she was hosting and made threatening statements. She's requesting a restraining order. I laughed. I couldn't help it. Detective, I attended a public charity event to which I made a substantial donation. I spoke briefly with Mrs. Whitmore at her request in a private office. I made no threats. What I did do was tell her I didn't forgive her for sleeping with my boyfriend 5 years ago. That's not harassment, that's honesty. There was a pause. You had a personal relationship with Mrs. Whitmore? She's my identical twin sister, I said. And yes, we have a history. But I haven't seen or spoken to her in 5 years. I'm in Boston for an architectural conference. I spoke on a panel this afternoon. There are about 200 witnesses who can confirm I'm here professionally. I ran into her at her charity event. We had an unpleasant but brief conversation about our past and I left. That's not harassment. Another pause. I see. Well, Mrs. Whitmore seems quite distressed. She's claiming you implied threats against her marriage. I implied nothing, I said, my voice cold now. I asked her if she'd considered that a man who cheats with you might cheat on you. That's not a threat, it's a question. If she's worried about her marriage, perhaps she should speak to her husband rather than calling the police on her estranged sister. Fair enough, the detective said, and he sounded tired. Look, Miss Kane, I'm calling as a courtesy. There's no actual violation here and I suspect Mrs. Whitmore knows that. She's upset and lashing out. But try to avoid her for the rest of your stay in Boston, all right? No more charity events, no more conversations. Gladly, I said. I have no interest in Isabel Whitmore's life. I came to Boston for work and I'm leaving Sunday morning. I hung up and sat on my hotel bed, my hands shaking. Not from fear, from anger. She tried to weaponize the police against me. After everything, after 5 years of silence, she tried to paint me as the villain for showing up and speaking the truth. I texted Naomi. Isabel called the cops on me. Apparently telling someone their marriage might fail is harassment now. Her response, are you okay? Me, yeah. Just done with this city. Done with them. Coming home Sunday and never looking back. Naomi, good. Seattle needs you. They don't deserve you. The conference gala was Saturday night. I debated not going. Detective Holder had said to avoid Isabel, and there was a chance she'd be there with Alexander. But this was the biggest networking event of the conference. Major firms, international developers, potential clients. Missing it would be letting them win again, letting them define what spaces I could occupy. So I went. I wore the midnight blue dress, the expensive one. I wore a Cartier watch. I wore confidence like armor and walked into that ballroom like I owned it. Alexander was there. I saw him across the room and our eyes met briefly. I looked away first, dismissively, and turned to talk to a developer from Singapore. Isabel wasn't there. Maybe she'd decided discretion was better. Maybe Alexander had told her to stay home. Either way, her absence felt like a small victory. The evening was productive. I made connections, discussed potential projects, and represented my firm well. And I did it all in the city that had tried to destroy me, in a room that probably held people who'd quietly refused to hire me 5 years ago, wearing success like a weapon. At 10 p.m., as I was saying goodbye to a client and preparing to leave, Alexander approached me again. Victoria, could we talk? Please. I was tired. Tired of this city, tired of this history, tired of the Whitmores and their drama. What could we possibly have left to say to each other? I asked. Isabel told me what you said to her. About infidelity. I asked her a question, I corrected. I asked if she'd considered that a man who cheats with you might cheat on you. It wasn't a threat or an accusation. It was philosophy. She thinks you know something, he said. She thinks you're implying I'm having an affair. Are you? No, he said firmly. I'm not. Our marriage has problems, but infidelity isn't one of them. Not on my end. Then you have nothing to worry about, I said. And neither does she. Victoria, I understand you're angry. You have every right to be angry. But Isabel is. She's fragile right now. The police call upset her terribly. She called the police on me, I interrupted. I showed up at a public event, we had a conversation, and she tried to have me arrested for harassment. Don't talk to me about her being upset. She's convinced you're trying to ruin our marriage, he said. Your marriage ruined mine, I said flatly. You two destroyed my career, my reputation, my relationship with my family. You got everything you wanted and I got exile and ashes. But I rebuilt, Alexander. I built something better. And if your marriage is fragile now, that's not because of anything I did. That's because of how it started. That's the foundation you built. Betrayal and selfishness. Don't blame me when it starts to crack. Victoria. We're done, I said. This conversation, this history, us. We're done. I'm flying back to Seattle tomorrow morning and I'm never coming back to Boston. You and Isabel can have this city. You can have your fragile marriage and your guilt and your complications. I have a life I actually built on solid ground. I walked away. This time he didn't follow. I flew home to Seattle Sunday morning. Naomi picked me up from the airport, took one look at my face and drove me straight to our favorite coffee shop. Tell me everything, she demanded. I told her. Alexander at the reception. The charity luncheon. Isabel's tears and my cruelty. The police called. The confrontation at the gala. Damn, Naomi said when I finished. You went scorched earth. I did, I admitted. And I don't know if I feel good about it. Do you feel closure? I thought about that. No, I said slowly. I thought I would. I thought seeing them, showing them what I'd become would feel like winning. But it just feels empty. That's because revenge isn't actually satisfying, Naomi said gently. Success is satisfying. Building something that matters is satisfying. Showing up to people who doubted you is satisfying. But hurting people who hurt you, that just makes you feel hollow. So what do? You let it go, she said. Not for them, for you. You've proven you can survive without them. Now prove you can thrive without them defining you. He was right. I knew she was right. Over the next few weeks I threw myself into work. Kane Architecture Seattle landed 2 major new contracts. We hired 5 more architects. I started mentoring young designers, particularly women who were fighting to be taken seriously in a male-dominated field. And slowly Boston faded. Not forgotten, it would never be forgotten, but no longer the defining trauma of my life. Just a chapter. A painful one, but finished. Until 3 months later when I got a call from an unknown Boston number. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. Victoria Kane. Victoria, it's Alexander. I nearly hung up. I thought we were done. We are. I'm not calling about us. I'm calling because Isabel left me. Silence. I didn't know what to say. 2 weeks ago, he continued, his voice flat. She filed for divorce. She's claiming. He laughed, a bitter sound. She's claiming I was emotionally unavailable and our marriage was built on an unstable foundation. Her lawyers are arguing she's entitled to a significant settlement because she gave up her career to support mine. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because you were right, he said simply. What you said at the gala. About the foundation being betrayal. About it starting to crack. You were right. And I think you deserve to know that. I don't take pleasure in your pain, Alexander, I said quietly. I did once. But not anymore. I know. That's why I'm calling. Not because I want your pity or your forgiveness. But because you deserve the truth. Isabel didn't leave because of anything you said. She left because living with the guilt of how we started finally became unbearable. She could never be sure I was faithful, never trust that I wouldn't do to her what we did to you. And that ate away at us until there was nothing left. The thing about building on betrayal, I said, is that you never really trust the ground beneath you. No, he agreed. You don't. There was a long pause. I'm sorry, he said finally. For all of it. For what I did to your career, for choosing Isabel, for not being strong enough to resist the temptation. You deserved better. You deserved everything I promised you. And I destroyed it because I was weak and selfish. Yes, I agreed. You did. For what it's worth, he said, I've followed your career. Kane Architecture Seattle is remarkable. The work you're doing is the work we talked about all those years ago. Meaningful, beautiful, important work. You did it without me. You did it despite me. I did, I said. And Alexander, I'm grateful for that. Because if you hadn't destroyed my Boston life, I might never have built my Seattle one. And this life? It's better. It's mine. So in a weird way, thank you. You're a better person than I am, he said quietly. No, I corrected. I'm just a person who had to learn the hard way that the only foundation you can truly trust is the one you build yourself. We said goodbye. I hung up the phone and stood at my office window, looking out at Seattle's skyline. Naomi appeared in my doorway. Was that who I think it was? Yeah, I said. Isabel left him. Their marriage imploded exactly the way I predicted. How do you feel? I thought about that. Sad, I said finally. Not for them specifically. Just sad that it had to be this way. That they hurt me so badly that they hurt themselves in the process. That 5 years later we're all just scared people trying to build lives from the wreckage. That's very mature of you, Naomi said. I'm 31, I said. I'm tired of carrying anger. It's too heavy. So what now? Now, I said, turning away from the window, we finished the Downtown Commons project. We hired that brilliant intern we interviewed last week. We keep building. That's what we do, we build things that last. And that's what I did. Today, Kane Architecture Seattle employs 43 people. We've won awards. We've been featured in national magazines. We've designed buildings that will stand for generations, spaces that make people's lives better. I'm 32 years old. I date occasionally, though I'm careful. Trust doesn't come easily anymore. I talk to my parents again, though the relationship will never be what it was. I've built a found family with Naomi, with my team, with people who chose me rather than being bound to me by blood. And Isabel? I don't know where she is or what she's doing. Sometimes I wonder if she rebuilt like I did, if she found a way forward. Mostly I just hope she's okay. Not for her sake, for mine. Because carrying hatred for her was exhausting and I have better things to do with my energy. The best revenge, I learned, isn't destruction. It's not showing up at charity luncheons or planting seeds of doubt or watching marriages implode. The best revenge is building something so solid, so true, so completely yours that no one can ever take it from you again. The best revenge is becoming the person you were always meant to be, with or without them. The best revenge is waking up and realizing you've stopped counting days since they hurt you, because you're too busy counting the beautiful things you've built. That's my revenge. And it's enough. So that's my story. From broken and betrayed in Boston to rebuilt and successful in Seattle. If you've ever had someone take something from you that you thought defined you, remember this. They can take the thing, but they can't take your ability to build something new. Something better. Leave a comment telling me about your comeback story. Hit that subscribe button if you believe in rising from ashes. And remember, the best revenge is a life well lived. Thanks for listening.